Hello, and thank you for downloading Witness from the BBC World Service. It's 25 years since the end of a campaign which brought violence to the famous tea-growing region of Darjeeling in northern India. During the early 1980s, Nepali-speaking separatists were agitating for autonomy for what they called Gorkhaland. But in August 1988, a deal was done to end the violence. Claire Bowes has been speaking to two sisters whose family was devastated by the uprising.
It's the late 1980s, and two once tranquil hill stations of northern India have become a battleground. The towns of Darjeeling and Kalimpong lie at the foot of the Himalayas, bordering Nepal. Established as hilltop retreats by the British, they make their money from tea and tourism. But now the only visitors are riot police and reporters.
Before, Kalimpong was very, very peaceful. Claire, it was a very, very peaceful place. It was so peaceful that people had actually never even heard of a curfew. And the first time a curfew was clamped in Kalimpong town, people from the villages were flocking to this town to see the curfew.
For 2 years, from 1986 to 1988, curfews and strikes were the norm. Sharda Mukhia and her family had lived in Kalimpong for generations, but like the majority of people in the hills, they were originally from Nepal, many having come to work in the tea plantations when the area was controlled by the British. Now they were part of the state of West Bengal, and some didn't like it.
In every aspect, the people here are so different from the rest of Bengal. Maybe it was already in the heart of the people that we need a state of our own. And of course, life did change. Everything was so uncertain. We wouldn't know when the next strike would be. Everything was affected. Offices, banks, schools, everything had to close down. There were no vehicles on the road, and water supply, all that was affected. So life did very drastically change.
The strikes were called by the Gorkha National Liberation Front to draw attention to their demand for a semi-autonomous state called Gorkhaland. The name was designed to carve out an Indian identity for the community, as well as bringing to mind the Gorkhas of the Indian army who were held in high regard. Subhash Gising led the GNLF.
We have been treated as immigrants, foreigners. We don't like this. We are demanding a separate state in the name of Gorkhaland. But we are not demanding sovereign country because we want to remain in India.
But not everyone was in favour of Gorkhaland, and a power struggle broke out between GNLF supporters and those who sided with the local Communist Party governing West Bengal. Young men began attacking each other using homemade rifles and planting bombs made out of pressure cookers. Soon, India's riot police, the CRPF, were called in to keep the peace. But this just added to the tension.
If they saw any male Nepali youth, they had branded them as militants, and they would just arrest them without any rhyme or reason. They would arrest them. They would have to go through a lot of torture, and they would just walk into anybody's house. They would thoroughly ransack the place on the pretext of searching. So people were absolutely terrified because of the police atrocities. Most of the men in our locality, most of the men we knew, they had already fled. But, we knew that we were innocent. We were not involved in any kind of arson, or we were completely innocent. Being Christians, we knew that we could not do anything anti-national.
But in February 1988, the GNLF announced its final stand, a strike lasting 40 days. Anticipating trouble ahead, Sharda's husband, David Mukhia, decided to leave for Nepal. On the morning of February 25th, Sharda went to work, leaving her husband at home with her children and her sister, Pratistha.
My brother-in-law was working outside the house because he had to leave the same day. I was in the kitchen. My nieces were doing their own little household chores. So my brother-in-law just came running inside and he said, "Close the door, close all the doors. The CRPF are here."
Pratistha was just 17 at the time.
And we were all shocked. We didn't know what to do. The CRPF had fired a shot outside. So they asked my brother-in-law to come outside. He had left the door open. From the back door he had come. So I went running to close the back door. As I closed the back door and entered into the kitchen again, He was already out of there. He pushed me back and he just went outside and he locked the door. He bolted the door from outside. And this was when the second shot came in, and that was the time I heard a thud and my brother-in-law was down on the floor. We couldn't come out. The door was closed, and when I looked out of the window, there were CRPF personnel all over, all around our house, as if my brother-in-law was a militant.
After a short while, a neighbour unbolted the door from the outside.
And when I went out, I was shocked. My brother-in-law was on the floor. We were shocked, we couldn't think much. So I thought my brother-in-law was just acting he was dead, just to save us. So when I went up to him, I called him Bhenaju, that means my brother-in-law, my older brother-in-law. So I said, I think they're going now. Come on, get up. And he was holding my hand. He held it tight. My second niece went to get water for him. We gave him some water. He just swallowed that bit of water, a spoon. And then he held our hands tight, and then he was gone. You know, I could still hear the CRPF personnel around me. I could smell them. Atrocious smell, horrible smell. And they had red eyes. And they were holding guns even to shoot at us. But I don't know what happened, they didn't shoot. And they just said, chalo chalo, means let's go. And we were left with our brother-in-law there. Then suddenly I felt something in my toe. Then when I looked, I saw blood. Then I knew he was no longer with us.
Meanwhile, Shada Mukhia was on her way home from work when a neighbour told her there'd been a shooting at her house. She headed straight for the hospital.
I ran to the hospital from there. When I think of it now, I don't know how I ran. I must have been running like a mad woman. So when I went to the hospital, everybody told me that he was in the operation theatre and they were trying to remove the bullet. But nobody had the courage to tell me that he had already died. And then I had to say, okay, you can tell me. I said, is he already dead? So that was the time that they took me to him. That was the time I saw him. I'm so sorry, Claire. And it's been 25 years, but it's too painful. It's more than 25 years, Claire. But everything's so fresh. I'm so sorry, I'm crying. And that was the time I saw my husband. He had already died on the spot itself.
Shada Mukhia demanded an inquiry into her husband's death. An investigation team was sent to Kalimpong from the CRPF. In August, she received a report which said,
"We profoundly regret the sad demise of your husband and the trauma it has caused your family. After careful examination of the evidence, the inquiry has revealed that the CRPF were not involved in the shooting incident at your house."
In August 1988, the GNLF were granted semi-autonomy, but many in the hills are still campaigning for a separate state. Shada Mukhia and her sister, Pratistha Pradhan, continue to live in Kalimpong.
Claire Bowes. For details of our complete range of downloads and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.